Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar to explore the open source wellness behavioral pharmacy model. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Fanny Cruz. I am the program analyst for the programs and services team here at CCUSA. I'm just going to go through a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. First, we would like you to know that this webinar is being recorded, and it will be posted to the members only portal, the CCUSA website. And we will send you the link via a follow-up email after the presentation. Also, keep in mind that we love to hear from you, so please submit any question that you have during the presentation, either using the platform chat function and sending us any question that you might have, and then at the end we will make sure to have we will have a Q&A section, and then we will make sure to follow up to respond to those. Also, you can raise your hand option and let us know that if you would like for us to open the lines and so you can voice your question. Now I would like to welcome our presenter for today. We have Dr. Elizabeth Markle. She is, I need to do this before. She's a licensed psychologist, is a professor and a chair of the Community Mental Health of California Institute of Integral Studies. She is also founder and executive director of the Open Source Wellness Clinical Community Integration Initiative, offering experimental behavioral health and wellness via the behavioral pharmacy approach for individuals and families. She recently served as a project director with the Wellbeing Trust, a new foundation focusing on the mental, social, and spiritual health of the nation. She's a formerly, Elizabeth served as a postdoctoral fellow at the San Francisco, dedicated to multi-theoretical and multi-level approaches to individual and community health and healing. Her research and entrepreneurship are focusing on systems designed to generate social support, social capital, and social sustainability in health and healthcare. So we are honored to have her as our presenter today. So Elizabeth, please take it from here.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, welcome, and it's still morning here in California, but I know it's afternoon for most of you. I want to thank you for being here. I know that your time is valuable, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. I think I'll start by sharing a little bit about where open source wellness comes from, and really to situate it as both a model and a movement. And as such, I hope that I can offer something of value to you today around a model that aspects of which you may want to incorporate. But more interesting, I think, to all of us involved is to have a conversation about what's possible as a movement, because the wisdom in this electronic room in this webinar is substantial, and I'm looking forward to the conversation that we might have. I know I look a little silly like a telemarketer here. Please let me know if for any reason you can't hear me or if the video cuts out. We will do our best to make that better. So, open source wellness. Here's what I want to say about this. I'm going to start with things that you already know, which is that chronic, progressive, and preventable health conditions are driving human suffering and skyrocketing health costs. The statistics here over on the right side of the screen happen to be about physical health, but we could say exactly the same for mental health. I'm a psychologist by training and spent a number of years, working in large healthcare organizations. And what my co-founder and I discovered is something kind of fascinating that I think may be resonant for some of you. It's that almost regardless of diagnosis, whether a patient has depression or diabetes or obesity or cardiac disease or any other chronic condition, and regardless of provider specialty, so whether we're talking about primary care docs or case managers or behavioral health or specialists, that healthcare professionals are giving most of their patients the same set of behavioral instructions, the same for behavioral prescriptions, as it were. And if you were all in a room together, we could crowdsource this. But in brief, they are, number one, exercise more. Number two, you need to eat better, reduce your stress, and get some social support and some connection in your life. And then here's the part that makes me depressed. They then say something like, good luck with that, I'll see you in 6 months. I can't tell you how many times I've heard something like that. And there was a bit of an aha moment when my co-founder and I said, wait a minute. When we give somebody a prescription for medication, like antibiotics or like insulin, we would never say, you're going to need antibiotics or you're going to need insulin. I'm sure you'll figure that out. Good luck finding it. I'll see you in 6 months. It would be unthinkable, unethical, right? What we say is your prescription will be ready at the pharmacy that's around the corner from your home, your insurance will cover it, and a friendly pharmacist will be there to make sure you not only learn about the treatment, but actually get the medication and understand how to take it. Our country has an incredible delivery system or infrastructure for delivering on medication. It's called the pharmacies. But for these basic transdiagnostic behavioral prescriptions that incidentally are the most effective way to prevent, manage, treat these chronic conditions, there is no delivery system. And so a prescription to exercise more, eat better, reduce your stress, get some social support is a prescription to nowhere. And the second depressing part for me is that this is where there's a fork in the road, because our patients who have privilege have access to the boutique wellness system, and they can shop at Whole Foods, hire a health coach, take up Pilates, right? They have the time and the neighborhoods and the sociocultural access to the boutique wellness system, which can help them fill these behavioral prescriptions. But I know that I'm preaching to the choir here if I say that the patients that we are working with in the safety net systems, these prescriptions are a prescription to nowhere. There is no delivery system for it. And we see them cycle back through our emergency departments, their chronic conditions worsen, and even more problematically, they start to experience shame. They think it's their fault that they are not well. So we'll come back to that. But at the 30,000 foot level, we founded Open Source Wellness to design and iterate and learn how to implement a behavioral pharmacy that delivers on one universal prescription, which is move, nourish, connect, be. Physical activity, healthy meals, social support, and stress reduction. And in the design for this, we're very committed to a couple of things. One is that this was not going to become a replication of the boutique wellness industry, but that it was going to be democratized. Just as CVS is more or less the same, whether you have privilege or you don't, we wanted to create a delivery system that would experientially deliver these medicines no matter your level of privilege. The experiential part is really important because many of you are thinking, well, we have health classes, we have health promotion, we have health ed, what's different? And I wanna suggest that information is cheap these days. And I haven't met many patients that don't know that they should move more or that they might want to eat less sugar. So I think education is not enough, and that the experiential nature of not just talking about healthy behaviors, but actually doing them together in community is the edge that we're pushing here. So we say that community is medicine, and I will say that over the 3 years that we've been running Open Source Wellness, one thing we have learned very clearly is that physical activity, healthy meals, stress reduction are all great. They're not rocket science. They're very important, and that the community, the connection, the social support, and the accountability that can be generated in this kind of context is the active ingredient. It is the animating of this basic platform that is magic. And so I want to share a little bit about what we have as a model and then shift our conversation to that of a movement. And as a model, I just want to be transparent that, you know, we're 3 years into this and it's not perfect. And one of my dearest hopes for this conversation would be that some of you all work to implement this kind of work in a way that works for you and that we collectively learn how to make the model better. So I'll share what we know. I look forward to the conversation and the questions that may follow. So here's what happens. The idea is that a doctor could prescribe Move, Nourish, Connect, Be, and that's exactly what happens. So we're based in the Bay, the San Francisco area, and I'll speak first. We have a clinical site, a community site, a low-income housing site, and we do some corporate-based work because Our vision is to animate each of these contexts or communities as platforms for health. But what first happens is that a healthcare provider prescribes engagement in our program. And sometimes they say something like, okay, your A1C is high and you now qualify for prediabetes. I want to write you a prescription, but it's a different kind of prescription. It's not for medication, it's for participation in a community. And incidentally, doctors are much better referrers when they've actually visited us. When they've engaged in this kind of program, they make very high quality referrals. Before that, it's a tougher sell. So somebody gets a referral to Open Source Wellness, and they get a call from one of our coaches. And that's the first point of contact that starts building a relationship. They have a phone conversation about what hurts, what matters to them, what they want to achieve in their health and their well-being in their lives. And then they engage with us for an initial dose. So just like with antibiotics, there's a dose of maybe 10 days. With Open Source Wellness, there's a dose of either 12 or 16 weeks, depending on the context. And then what happens there, no matter where we are, is somewhat similar. So I'm going to share some photos with you of this sort of unfolding. We bring patients together ideally for 2 hours once a week. And the first thing we do after some welcoming and a check-in and introductions is physical movement. And we don't even call it exercise because the idea is that it doesn't feel like work, that it's fun. So there's dance, there's improv, there's gentle stretching. The idea is that folks are sweating a little, but they're laughing, they're connecting, they are actually cultivating joy while we're doing movement. After about 20 to 25 minutes of movement, we shift to a brief mindfulness activity, and this is about 5 minutes of zero dogma mindfulness. So there may be some sort of meditation, there may be a guided relaxation or an imagination or a visualization, but there's some kind of practice in quieting the body and the mind. After that, there's a brief, and I mean less than 10 minutes, experiential didactic around some topic related to health. So it could be around nutrition, could be about drinking water, could be about interpersonal connection and boundaries, but there's some experience that exposes participants to some aspect of cultivating well-being that may be new to them. And then the fun starts. We split up into small groups, so there may be, say, 30 participants in the room to start, and then we split up into small groups and have a meal together. And in some of our sites, it's a full meal, in some sites, it's a snack, but it's plant-based, healthy food that is designed to be tasty. And we never say the word vegan or plant-based, it just happens to be plant-based food. And this is sort of where the magic happens because participants have about 45 minutes to an hour to sit with their small group and tell the truth about their lives. And this is where participants get really honest with themselves and with each other about their health and their well-being and their families, and sometimes about their trauma and their despair and their use of substances. And at every table is a coach and a peer leader. And the peer leader is someone who has been through the program and is really wanting to stay actively engaged. So after that, participants, we sort of close out the evening or the afternoon. There's a little bit of large group sharing and participants head home. And in between weekly gatherings, they are on a text thread with their coach and their small group. And this is where the declarations, the commitments, the goals, the accountability, the support, the empathy, all of the goodness that may happen in psychotherapy, but is really expensive in the form of psychotherapy, happens in the form of peer support. So as an aside, I am a psychotherapist. I believe in psychotherapy, but I think as a culture, as a society, we will never have enough money to provide one-on-one psychotherapy for everybody. And so we need to leverage structures of social support, of empathy, of validation, of accountability, of all those good things that leverage the power of community to achieve the same results. So I'm going to keep going here. Some of you may be thinking, you know, we do some of this. We maybe do movement. We do mindfulness classes. I'm going to share a little bit about what I see as different about this model. So first, we're highly, highly experiential. So as you can see from those photos, there's not a lot of handouts. There's not a lot of lecture time at all. We are committed to being 99% transdiagnostic, meaning we don't segregate out groups by diagnosis. because the fundamental prescription of Move, Nourish, Connect, Be applies no matter what your primary diagnosis is. And we know that comorbidity is actually the rule rather than the exception, and that Move, Nourish, Connect, Be helps almost everybody and it hurts nobody, especially those of us who are more or less healthy and trying to stay well. So we have found that bringing folks together, some who have a primary physical health diagnosis, some who have a mental health diagnosis that's risen to the surface, some who have more social isolation or social anxiety concerns, some who have a chemical related diagnosis. It's actually a very powerful community or cultural field that can be created there. Third, we're very committed to this being culturally flexible and turnkey in its implementation. So the idea is not that you eat this kind of food or you use this kind of movement or this kind of music, but that within Move, Nourish, Connect, Be, that structure is almost infinitely adaptable. So when we work in a low-income housing community with formerly homeless individuals who are primarily African American, the music is different, the food is different, everything needs to be culturally relevant to that group. And it's very different in Hayward, California, where the population is largely Latinx, and they just engage in a very different way. So the vision here is to create a framework or a DNA that can be adapted in many, many different settings. Fourth, we say we're powered by connection. So we track a number of outcomes. One is that some are behavioral, so fruit and vegetable intake.
I think I think it was the slide before when we lose the connection.
This one?
Yes. I think you were about to start that slide when we lost you.
Oh, goodness. At the very top of this slide. Okay, my apologies. So I'll just run through this very quickly. We're different from what I've experienced in health promotion and health education, even in group medical visits in a number of ways. First, that we are highly, highly committed to being experiential, that we don't spend a lot of time talking about health behaviors and a lot more time doing them together. Second, that we are transdiagnostic, meaning that we have not found it to be helpful or necessary to segment out patient populations by diagnoses, because the fundamental prescription of Move, Nourish, Connect, Be is universal. It hurts nobody, it helps everybody, including those who are generally well and want to stay well. Third, that we are culturally flexible. And so I'll share, we've done this work with a number of different populations. We find that the music, the food, the movement, the coaching style all needs to be radically adapted to the population. So when we work in low-income housing communities with those who are formerly homeless, that's a different community, it's a different vibe, it needs to be a different approach than when we're in, say, Hayward, California, in a clinical setting with a Latinx population. So the vision here is not to have the open source wellness way, but to have a basic structure, a DNA of Move, Nourish, Connect, Be, some basic design principles that can inform the adaptation and the manifestation that works for your community. Fourth, we say we're powered by connection, and we rely much more heavily on relationship, on support, on individual goals and accountability, on peer leadership, than we do on expert information from the front of the room. And finally, we're very, very committed to this being affordable and the democratization of that which Dean Ornish has spent 30 years proving to be true. So Ornish has spent 30 years literally demonstrating through incredibly rigorous research that lifestyle change and behavior change can transform health outcomes. And his programming, because it's delivered with an MD, a PhD, an RD, an RN, tends to be expensive and tough to spread and scale. So our vision is to create a structure that can be implemented at the level of the community and be accessible to those who need it most. All right, I'm just nervous here. Can everybody still hear me? Still happening?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. I appreciate that. All right, so I'm going to share just briefly about data and outcomes. We track a number of outcome measures. Some are behavioral, so I'll start there. This data is taken from our clinical model. So we work in partnership with Alameda Health System in Hayward, California, in a big primary care clinic. So we're seeing fruit and vegetable intake increase by about a serving a day, increase in weekly minutes of exercise substantially. You'll see effect sizes, those are the D on the bottom. So those are sort of moderate effect sizes. And then depression, anxiety, and isolation. So we're measuring depression via the PHQ-9. I'm sure many of you are using the same. And when we look specifically at a subset, so this subset here around depression is our participants who came in with depression scores elevated. We're seeing substantial changes, and what's fascinating to me is that the effect size here is around 0.9, which is 2 to 3 times higher than what we see with SSRIs. And we know that the data around meds for mild to moderate depression is not good, and it makes sense to us that social connection, that physical activity, that engagement and support and connection have these effects. I just pause here and name that what we see if we watch the data really closely, we see an arc of effects happen. The first thing we see happen is social effects, and these are harder to measure, but our participants say something like, I don't feel so alone anymore. I feel like I have hope for the first time. I feel like I have a sense of belonging, that somebody cares about me and I care about them too. And then within maybe 4 to 8 weeks, we see these mental health measures shift. We see tremendous shifts in depression and anxiety happening very, very early in the engagement with open source wellness. And then finally, the last thing we see shift is biomarkers. So this is from a hypertensive subset of the participant group. We start to see blood pressure, weight, even A1C start to come down. And I think that the timeline of that arc is important, that it's not that people get healthier and then they feel happier and then they feel more connected. It's that there's a social effect followed by a mental health effect, followed by a physical health effect. And I think that's noteworthy. Lastly, I just want to note, when we look at acute care visits, 6 months prior to the group, a population of participants of 49 had 22 ED visits or hospitalizations. The 6 months following participation in the group, they had 5. I haven't replicated this data, so I want to be cautious about it. It feels too good to be true to me, but I am excited about it. And I don't know what to attribute this to other than contact, engagement, being connected to community and clinic in a way that has folks feel attended to and engaged with in an entirely different way. So, quick run through of the models in which we've implemented to date. We run a clinically integrated model currently with Alameda Health System. And just to name how we're doing this, we bring in our staff, which is health coaches and peer leaders, and then one nurse practitioner, so one provider, participates in the group, pulls participants aside for 5 to 10-minute check-ins, and then can bill as a group medical visit. So that's part of how we're making this model sustainable in the community setting. We have a in the clinical setting. We have a community-based site in Oakland in partnership with Prevention Institute. That's their beautiful building there. And that site operates just like a CVS in that we take prescriptions from many health systems across the region and serve participants outside of the clinical setting. We've done some work in low-income housing communities where there's a concentration of individuals who have high trauma burdens and multiple chronic conditions. And then we've done a number of corporate employee well-being series and sessions using the same principles of Move, Nourish, Connect, Be to animate the workplace as a platform for health. So I want to take a moment and show a quick video that I think will just bring some of this to life. It's better seen than heard about here.
If I had to describe open source wellness in one word, it would be opportunity.
I don't know a word that means healthy and fun at the same time.
I'd probably say community, but I might also say fun.
I'm Dr. Elizabeth Markle.
I'm Dr. Ben Emmert Aronson.
We're the co-founders of Open Source Wellness. Open Source Wellness is a behavioral pharmacy.
When I leave from a night at Open Source Wellness, I feel great. I feel free. I feel at peace. I feel cared for. I even feel loved.
We found during our time practicing as psychologists in big healthcare settings that healthcare providers are constantly making behavioral prescriptions. It sounds like move more, eat better, reduce your stress, get some social support. Unfortunately, doctors often then say things like, good luck with that, I'll see you in 6 months. We know that if we're going to make behavioral prescriptions, we need to have a delivery system or a pharmacy on the other side of that.
One of the things we talked about is goal setting.
The first goal I ever set was about my cigarette addiction.
So I made a commitment for 4 weeks to find a recipe and make it once a week.
It kind of came to me that what I really wanted to work on was what's inside, really my emotional well-being.
Today I made the commitment I will get up half hour after I wake up.
So at Open Source Wellness, we support patients with physical activity, healthy meals, stress reduction, and social support. And we do it in a way that is affordable, accessible, culturally relevant, and experiential, meaning we don't just talk about healthy living, we do it together in community.
When I get home, I don't even really want to smoke. And the whole time up here, I'm not even thinking about a cigarette, you know what I mean? It just, wow.
And I believe that the staff here really want to make a difference. They're young and they're energetic, and so they can keep me moving at a pace that's new for me because I have a sedentary lifestyle.
I was not having the same anxiety, I was not feeling the same stress, because the movement, the exercise, it makes you to feel better. So I really like it.
Liz and I both led enough of those classes that are like in a dark basement somewhere trying to get people to exercise more or to eat better and telling them about it, telling them the thing that they're supposed to do. And then they go home and do exactly what they've been doing. We mostly do what's fun and easy. And so our goal at Open Source Wellness was to make the healthy decision the easy decision.
We've spent 2 years refining our program based on outcomes data, and we now have models ready for easy and affordable implementation in clinical healthcare settings, community-based settings, low-income housing settings, and corporate employee wellness settings. Contact us to get involved or to partner with Open Source Wellness. We can't change healthcare alone.
I feel safe here. And I feel free. Let me say that. That's a huge word. I feel free.
All right. So I named briefly, let me just pause for a moment. Whenever I watch those videos, what lands for me is that it doesn't look like healthcare. It looks like something else. It looks like community. It looks like fun. It looks like joy. It looks like humanity. And something interesting happens at the end of the evenings at Open Source Wellness, or the end of the lunchtime, if it's a lunch hour. We give participants an opportunity to share in front of the whole group 3 things. They'll share a gratitude, something they're grateful for. We do offers and requests, which gives participants an opportunity to speak to any way that they may need support or accountability or resources, and they sort of build community between each other in that way. And lastly, they get to make a declaration. So we ask them to name what their commitment is for the week. And at first, participants name goals around exercise, around nutrition, around stress reduction. But something interesting started to happen. Our participants started saying things like, I'm going to floss my teeth, or I'm going to deal with my credit card debt, or I'm going to reach out to my mother because I haven't talked to her in years. And at first we thought, that's weird. You know, we've never talked about dental hygiene from the front of the room. We've certainly never talked about personal finances. But what started to come to us is that when our participants start to have little successes, when they start to feel a little bit better in their bodies, when they start to feel less alone, less shame, less despair, there's an activation energy that happens, and they start to take on the things that matter to them in their lives. And that's what is exciting about this to me, because health is a proxy in some ways for human well-being. And I am excited about the conversation we can have within healthcare and human services broadly about how we can cultivate thriving in addition to better biomarkers. So thanks for that aside. we're starting to sort of cultivate a step-down arc that we found to be effective for our participants, and so I'll share that briefly. Many of our participants start with a clinically integrated model. So their provider in the clinical visit has a conversation with them and then refers them via EMR integration to a group that's happening on site in partnership with the clinic. And that's billed as a group medical visit. There's a provider participating that can help support around any medication adjustments or any more acute concerns. And we usually like to run that as an intensive 4-month change program. And after they graduate from that, many of them choose to sort of step down to our community-based site. And sometimes if we have the space for it, we'll invite them to stay for 6 months. That's a real gift when we can do that. And then something kind of magical has happened. We have to graduate folks out of our community-based site, and they often don't want to go. And we have to make space. And so what's happened is that a number of our peer leaders, that's participants who graduated and sort of stayed engaged, have started what they are calling OSWX. So just like there's TED Talks and then there's TEDx, OSWX is the independently organized lifelong maintenance program or engagement program around Move, Nourish, Connect, Be. So participants have found spaces, some private, some rented, to connect and to continue practicing the behaviors that they learned either in the clinically integrated model or in the community model. And we were sort of dubious about this at the start, but for years, AA meetings have been happening in this way, peer-led, based around a set of principles and practices that generate health and well-being. And so I'm curious about the sustainability of this. I recently had a participant in our community site have a good time on their first night, and on the way out, they said, "Liz, is this like church for health?" And I first said, no, this has nothing to do with church. Where did you get that idea? And then I said, well, wait a minute. If church is a place where people convene to engage in practices that are uplifting, that help them live in alignment with their values, that contribute to their well-being and to the society, then okay, maybe we are a little bit like a secular church for well-being. I'm going to stop talking here in a moment. I just want to sort of land with the idea that community as medicine, yes, we have a model that we're working to spread and to deliver and to help folks in adapting and adopting, but I am equally interested in the idea of a movement. And one of the things that I have gotten really clear about, both in my time working in big healthcare and now in leading open source wellness, is that our participants and our patients think it is their fault that they are unwell. They see images of people with privilege who look healthy and vibrant and well and are essentially doing all the right things, and they feel shame about their bodies and their minds being unwell. And our providers bless them, our clinicians feel helpless that they cannot create wellness, and we know what burnout looks like in our clinicians. And I know that this is not radical news to anybody, but the way that shame works, of course, is that when people feel shame, it's an intolerably painful emotion, and then they do something to make themselves feel better, which often is something that works in the short term, but doesn't work in the long term. So substances, food, sugar, television, inactivity, all the things that make us feel better immediately, but long-term contribute to chronic disease, which leads to more shame, which leads to more self-medication, which leads to more shame, and often disengagement with healthcare at all. So at Open Source Wellness, we work to intervene at both the shame part of that cycle and the action part of that cycle. So part of the magic of community, of coming together and being really honest about what hurts, about what you're doing, about the state of your physical and mental and social and spiritual well-being, has the magical effect of reducing shame. That's the beauty of peer support and empathy and validation. And then when shame is lightened, folks have a little bit more power to take action in the direction of their values. And at Open Source Wellness, we work to help participants to write their own prescriptions and then be committed to them. So this little image on the right here is an actual notepad that's on the table at every meal at Open Source Wellness. And at the end of the meal, the coach passes the pad around and everybody gets to write their own prescription for a behavior that they're committing to that week. And then on the text thread, you can bet that the coaches and other participants are helping hold each other accountable. And I think the arc of effects that we see, social improvements, mental health improvements, physical improvements, are the result of intervening in the shame and intervening in the action to create a new possibility for health and well-being. So I'm going to stop there and see if we can open up for questions and conversation. I'll share a little bit more before we close, but I would really like to hear what you are thinking at this point.
Well, thank you, Elizabeth. I have a question here. One of the attendees is asking how they can participate, how their agency can participate in one of the pilots.
Yeah, well, the short answer is just that we should have a conversation. We have found that trying to do this in a package way, saying, oh, this is just how we work, doesn't work, because every clinic, every context, whether rural or urban, and with grant funding or with billing, it really needs to be co-designed. So I would love to just have a conversation about how we could partner with one of your sites or your system to roll this out. And we partner from sort of fully implementing all the way down to just sort of light consulting to support you in doing something like this. So the idea is not to build an empire of open source wellness, but to support you in the movement in creating something like this.
Okay. Well, I see in the next slide, Dr. Elizabeth, that your information is included. So just to remind you that because people is asking for the slides, we will be sending a follow-up email that make sure you have their contact information, and so you can communicate with them and ask more details about the program. And also we will attach the recording of this webinar. Please send us your question. Let's see, we have here. Well, thank you for the information, and people asking for the material to learn more about the program. We will include the video that Dr. Elisa showed earlier along other resources in the follow-up email. So
great.
See. Well, we do not have any more questions on the chat feature, but also if you would like to, actually we do. Ms. Churchill is asking, what are some of the difficulties encountered by implementing the program?
Yeah, goodness, there are so many. Let's see. Well, so funding is always a challenge. You know, in the clinical setting, we can bill, but out in the community setting, we're not billing it as a medical service, and so finding funding for it is challenging. Whenever you're doing something that you're hoping multiple health systems will collaborate on, collaboration versus competition becomes a very interesting conversation. I'll also say that the program is not for everybody. It's highly social, and so, you know, some folks never make it in the door, and some folks come once and go, oh my goodness, this is not for me. And I think that just like medication is not for everybody or therapy is not for everybody, that this needs to be one of the menu of options available to participants. So let's see. You know, we're doing something that I think is a little bit on the edge of what is understood as healthcare. And so while some providers have a really strong intuitive, like, yes, this is what needs to happen, this is what my patients need, many health systems are still mired in downstream reactive billing determined service provision, and that's shifting as we move towards more value-based payments, and there's, you know, the incentives start to line up in the right directions, but I think there are challenges in the process of shifting towards being generators of health in addition to being trackers, diagnosers, and emergency interveners around health. I think healthcare is ambivalent about its relationship to social determinants of health and causing the generation of health and well-being upstream, in addition to being a downstream emergency service. So I'll pause there.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's see. They say that if this is available throughout the United States, to the nation, or it's just certain locations.
Sure. Well, it's available to be implemented throughout the United States, but we may have to do it in partnership with you. So right now, the sites that we are independently running are in the San Francisco Bay Area, but our structure is sort of train the trainer. So we would love to partner with you in your location to help you implement open source wellness on your site.
Okay, well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Any other questions? Let's see here. Well, apparently we don't have.
Okay. Well, I have a request.
We do have a follow-up question.
Okay.
It's a follow-up. Is asking about if the insurance companies are on board are taking the cost for the program.
Yeah, so we are in that conversation now. There's an insurer here in the Bay that has brought us in to work with all of their employees, which is a good first step, and is now working towards piloting, covering it, and doing a really extensive data evaluation about utilization and whether we can reduce total medical expenditure by providing these kinds of services. So we don't yet have Blue Shield or Kaiser all the way on board. We're starting with the smaller local insurance companies that can make decisions in a slightly more nimble way. But that is the ambition. That is the vision, that insurers are the ones who are financially at risk for the downstream costs of these chronic conditions piling up. So working in that direction. If there isn't another question, I'd like to make a request. I want to share some sort of exciting news with you. We're just, whoops, go back a slide. We were just named finalists for a National Behavioral Health Innovation Award. There's a foundation called the Scattergood Foundation. They're based in Pennsylvania, but they have a national scope. And exactly 1 week from today, we'll be at NatCon, which is the National Council for Behavioral Health. And we will learn whether or not we won this $25,000 award and national publicity. And that's going to help us with bringing this across the country and to some places that maybe don't have the funding to pilot it on their own. So here's the catch. The way this award is determined, the final winner is determined by public online vote. So it doesn't matter who you are or where you are, you can click on this link or go to the link on the left. It says voteosw.com. That will just redirect you to the voting site. And then you don't have to put in your email address or register anything. You can just click vote. And so if you would be willing to do that and or to share with your clinics or to share on social media or in any way, perhaps we can include that with the materials we send out. That's a way that you could help spread this model. And I would be incredibly appreciative. So this is my contact information. It's just liz@opensourcewellness.org. I would love to hear from you. I'm happy to have conversations, even if they're just exploratory, around what we're doing and what you're doing and what the synergies might be. So I'll pause there. Anything else that I could speak to that would be helpful?
Well, we don't have any other upcoming questions, but I just want to thank you very much for your time and for sharing your experience with us today. One way to show our appreciation is to access the link, and of course, I am sure that our member agencies will be glad to take a minute of their time and vote. But we do appreciate very much you joining us today and to share all the knowledge and experience with us. So any final comment that you have for our audience?
Well, I just want to say thank you for your time. I wish I could see you all and that we could be really having a conversation about this. I'd love to hear your experience about what you've tried and what you'd like to try and what you see is possible here. So I hope you won't hesitate to reach out, and thanks again.